Welcome everyone, and today's video is something which is just a lesson of which I learned and had to adapt to when I come on a recent match here at Monkhall. Now I drew peg 9 on the lark pool, which is probably the narrowest peg on the canal, and this made what I learned come into main factor. With it being the narrowest peg on the canal, with the wind blowing down towards me, so it's going towards 7, so it's coming through my channel, and as it's come through the channel it's obviously getting narrower, so the more wind that's coming through the channel, it's going to make more skim on the water. Now this caught me out big style in this match, and this is what I want to do, speak about fishing to conditions. Don't get me wrong, you see behind me now it's flat calm, you can get away with probably a 4B8s, 4x10s, anything you wanted to fish. But there's some days in winter time especially, is them days where you cannot beat the weather and you've got to fish differently, and that's fishing to the conditions which you're faced with. So you may ask what I was set up that day. Well, I set up a 4x10s maggot across, and the skim of the rig is too much. I couldn't fish it. It sat like on an angle, on an arc. I couldn't fish it effectively and catch the fish. So you may think, what would you do in that situation on snake lakes? I'll talk about open water in a minute, but snake lakes, what situation would you look for? Would you look for a bigger carbon stem float or a bigger wire stem float? Which did you choose? Well, I like to choose a wire stem float in a size 4x12 or 4x14, depending on how much skim is coming through your peg. Also, you want to be looking through for your back shot, so you want to add a bit more back shot. Hold that pole in position, make sure it's anchored on that shelf. You don't want to be skidding through. That's when you lead to foul up fish, missing bites, and it's not what you want in your matches. You want it pinned down, sat there on your pile of bait, ready for that sharp indication. Now it may seem not right fishing wire stem floats and maggots, you talk about going through the water all the time, but days when it's blowing a gale and there's a skim on the water, that's the only way you can catch them fish. Don't get me wrong, normally the fish are feeding a lot better when it's windy. You can catch them on bait, so it makes it a lot easier. With maggots, you just want to plonk your rig in, sit there and make sure you're nice and stable. So I'd look to choose a 4x12 or a 4x14. Now the shotting pattern, you may ask, I just use it just off my videos before on the shotting patterns. So there's little strung bulks of 9s, 8s, 9s and 10s, just to make sure it's nice and anchored. And like a 4x12 would be perfect for a tiny bit of skim. So say if you wanted to get away with a 4x10 maggot but it just wasn't right, then there's a bit of skim and you didn't want to use a 4x12, you could use a 4x12 F1 pellet, just sit it there nice and stable. The wire stem's going to sit in nice and in the water. But on days, that day I had up there, it was ridiculous. It was coming through, flying through, and a 4x14 was miles better. Yes, it looks horrible, but you've got to be fishing to your conditions, not the way you want to fish. I'd love to fish strung out rigs all the time. It's a brilliant way of fishing, but sometimes you've just got to forget about all that and plonk your bait in, plonk your rig in and catch that fish. Now you may ask, what's the difference with open water? Well, open water is going to move a lot more. So say like for today, if I was fished down the middle here in the open water, it's not really a snake like this one, and I used say a wire float, it still might ride up because of the slim body. Now what you want to be doing is looking to using an intercarbon or that style of float, rugby style float, little body, so it's got a body on it, so it just plonks in the water and sits there. Carbon or wire, it's up to you how you do it. Wire, so the interwire, you're going to get a lot more stability, but you are going to get stability with a carbon stem float. It just, you can follow your bait down, depends on the conditions. That's what you've got to decide. I can't sit here and tell you that's the perfect float for that situation. You've got to fish to your conditions. Every day is different, every weather's different, and that's how you got to fish. With that, again, just have a little bit longer line, back shot, make sure it's closer to your pole tip than your float, so you can drop it in the water, keep everything nice and tight like an L shape, keep it all nice and static. So this is why I've done this little video, just to talk you through them rigs, what to look for. Sometimes you might sit there and be like, oh, it's moving through. Look to change your rig so it sits there nice and positive. Say if you're using a 4x10 across, but it's just a tiny bit, you can get away with a 4x10 wire, but just be wary of how the fish are feeding. If you're not plonking it in there and sitting there nice and still, the fish might want it on the drop. If you chose to use a 4x10 F1 pellet, it might not have reverse if you have fished a 4x12 F1 carbon, F1 maggot, sorry, which is a carbon stem float. So you've just got to be wary about picking the floats. There's not a big selection. It's an F1 pellet, an F1 maggot and an inter series in wire or carbon, whichever you prefer. So it's not a lot, but it's just worth thinking about the conditions which you're faced with. Now, I hope this helps you in your fishing. Just to look for, I always say, just look at the conditions. You normally know what the weather's going to be like before you go, so just check that. And I hope this video helps you. Look out, and if you ever get in this situation again, or in that situation, you're much more prepared. I know I will be. If I ever get in that situation again, I'll be more prepared. I've got them in my box now. I've got them in my armoury. I'm there. I'm not going to second guess myself. If it's windy and skimming across, it's going on, and I'm not messing around. So I hope you enjoy this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps with the channel. You're not going to miss any future videos and stuff like that. And I'll see you on the bank soon. Cheers.